Hello whisky fans, welcome back for Dram number 5 of the Cask Explorers, really good whisky company. Scotch Whisky Single Malt Collection 25-day Advent Calendar rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? Dram number 5. I've been thinking this morning, I got an email that was waiting for me when I first woke up, and it was from one of the big online whisky retailers, and it said, great value whiskies under £80. And I've just been thinking about that ever since. Are we really in a state now where anything under £80 is great value? Maybe. Hopefully not. And I've been thinking about that in itself, and also in relation to this Advent calendar. I mean, the whiskies that we've had so far, the whiskey that we had yesterday, the Auchroisk 7-year-old from Parkmore, that's 46%, really good presentation, and it only sells for, I think it's £44, which does make me think that £80 being kind of called the cut-off for great value whiskey is probably a bit high. Whiskey prices have gone up and up over the last few years. But when I started getting serious about whiskey, which is probably going up for 20 years ago now, I think the cut-off that most people would have seen as reasonable would probably be like £35 in like the mid-2000s. Beyond that, people start to think that's just a bit extravagant, getting a bit fleeced there. And the fact that whiskey prices have gone up and up ever since then, it's not just to do with inflation, in my opinion. I think partly it is inflation, but on average things are not 2 to 3, even 4 times more expensive than they used to be. It's just that whiskey is not, it's harder to find the really good value stuff in whiskey than it used to be. But it is still out there, and I think that Parkmore from yesterday is a good example of that, and hopefully we'll find some other really good value, well presented quality whiskies over the next 3 weeks. So now that I've really warmed that up in my hand by waffling on, let's get it in the glass, see what we've got on the 5th of December. So that's another fruity one, but a very different fruitiness from the Madeira sweetness that we had yesterday. Let's give the glass a little bit of a rinse first. Let's put that out of the way. With my very fancy glass water dropper. Actually bought this at the Isle of Arran distillery almost 10 years ago now. Haven't dropped it yet. Shouldn't say that. Right, here we go. Let's make sure I poured enough, because I didn't yesterday. Bit more. I'll do. Sometimes you just realise what you're doing. Think, sitting in front of the camera, talking to yourself, drinking whiskey. Bizarre. The things we do. So there's another fairly dark one, probably not as dark as the previous two, not as dark as the Jura, which is almost certainly artificial coloured, and possibly as dark as the Parkmore, but a different shade. I quite like that. Really beautiful creaminess and a little bit of a sour yoghurt note on the nose. Very, very nice, very unusual, really pleasant, really characterful. I like that. Definitely a sour lactic, sort of natural yoghurt, sharp natural yoghurt note. Beautiful. Quite fruity, strawberry yoghurt perhaps. Very sour, sour and creamy. Really interesting. Really interesting to know what this is, because you don't often get that flavour profile. It's really unusual. probably a little bit weak, a little bit low ABV. Creamy on the palate, creamy, possibly some grain. If this wasn't the single malt, yeah, it is the single malt collection, I had to check there, I would say that there's possibly some grain whiskey gone into this, because it has got that very creamy, grainy note. But obviously it's just a single malt that has that flavour. Perhaps a little bit of smoke, very faint smoke on the palate of this one. As well as that strawberry note on the palate as well, I can't remember if I said that. Just organising my empty bottles here to try and keep track of the leaderboard, because there's nothing like leaving organisation to the last minute. I haven't actually written the leaderboard down now. So just a reminder, the leaderboard, we've got the Jura in alternate first place, aka last, bottom of the leaderboard. Then the Glengoyne above that, the Tomatin above that, and the Parkmore is currently in first. I think that really unusual nose on this one could put it above the Parkmore, above the Auchroisk, but the palate probably hints that it's a little bit too weak. Very pleasant though. A little bit simple on the palate. Creamy, more lactic yogurt notes. When I say lactic, I don't mean like a butyric sort of off milk note. It's not got that, which is quite often what you get when people describe a whiskey as lactic. It's not that. It's a straight dairy creaminess. Possibly not a whiskey for vegans. I'm joking, of course. Getting a little bit of a sour lime note on the nose now as well. Just going to put a lid on that and give it a little bit of time. So I've given that a bit of time with the lid on there. Much more rich now, but still got that really lovely, sour, slightly sharp, natural yogurt note. A little bit more honey, sort of sweet cask influence. Falls flat ever so slightly on the palate, and especially on the finish. The finish is really quite short, but on the palate, again, getting that nice, sharp, natural yogurt note and a little bit of creaminess, a little bit of maltiness. Get the occasional touch of maltiness that hints that there might be some slightly older casks in this. I don't think that it's an old whiskey. I would guess that from the ABV it doesn't seem like flat 40, because it would just be much more disappointing than this if it was 40%, but it's also not got the body that I would associate with 46 or higher, so I guess 43. So the real question is, where does this one go on the leaderboard? I think it's going to have to be second place. I think this one is going to slot in between the Tomatin 12 and yesterday's Parkmore Auchroisk. I would guess that this might be a very, very good blend, like a premium, gentle, well-made blend, if it wasn't for the fact that it's in the single malt advent calendar. Blends can be phenomenal. There's no reason why blended whiskey can't be amazing, apart from the fact that most people won't pay a lot of money for a blend, which means that when most companies make blends, they make cheap whiskey, because that's what they know will sell. But this has a little bit of a blendy character to it, despite it being a single malt. Anyway, rambling now, let's see what we've got. Clan Denny, Speyside single malt Scotch whisky. So it is a single malt, they haven't made a mistake. And it is 43% ABV. So Clan Denny, not really familiar with that. So it's a fairly premium presentation, not being minimum 40%. Let's see what we can find about Clan Denny. So I couldn't actually find anything on the Really Good Whiskey Company's website, but I found it elsewhere, and it appears to be, I found this Clan Denny Speyside single malt 43%, which I guess there's no point hiding the brand, the website that I found this on. I think it's that. And it's actually sold out on Master of Malt as well. So I don't know if it's possible to get this, but it did sell for £28 a bottle, which is very reasonable. I would pay £28 for a bottle of that. Denny Speyside. Clandestine, because we don't know what distillery this is from. It's reading from this website. Did they call it Denny on purpose because it's a clandestine whiskey? Probably not. Best known for single grain bottlings, which kind of makes sense because it does have a little bit of a grainy, blendy profile in a very good way. Denny label has also provided blended malts or vatted malts as they used to be known from Speyside and Islay. Undisclosed distillery, superior example, blah blah blah, finished in bourbon casks. Well, yeah, I suppose so. Doesn't really taste of anything else, but finished in bourbon casks? Why? Does that mean that they mature everything in refill casks and then re-rack it into fresh bourbon? Maybe. But yeah, £28, 43%. That's a good one. That's one to look for, I think. I enjoy that, especially for less than £30 a bottle. So that is going to go second on the leaderboard behind the Parkmore. Not the best presentation, but it is good, enjoyable and affordable whiskey. Let me know what you think about this one if you've had it, or if you know any more info about it, because I couldn't find a lot in my quick Google. Thanks for watching, and see you tomorrow. Cheers.